So here is Mayalen Cazenave, and I am Gwendoline Legrand. I hope you enjoy your first day. Who was there yesterday? Raise your hand. So we have new participants today. Thank you. And yesterday was the Open Innovation Day, but we already had very great and amazing demos that played on the parking plots that became a field, as you can notice. Sorry for my accent, maybe you don't understand everything I'm saying. Are you? Okay, that's good, thank you. I also want to make some noise for our partners and FIRA co-organizers. Gabriel Yutzi, I don't see him in the room right now, but he is the Chief of Innovation Officer at the University of California, Agriculture and Natural Resources. I also want to thank Walt Duflock, the VP of Innovation at Western Growers. Thanks to them, we made this FIRA USA happen, so a big thank you to them. There are so many other persons we want to thank for their involvement, thinking of our colleague Elisa from GoFar, but also Anna, Anif, Lucy, and Terry from the UCANR, Ben and Kara at Western Growers, and all the team that makes this amazing event happen. Well, as a recap, I just want to explain a little bit who is GoFar, because you're like, okay, they are French, what are they doing here? So, GoFar is the French non-profit organization. We aim to promote and support the agricultural robotics worldwide. That's why we're here. Since 2016, we've been organizing the World FIRA in France for the European market. It has become clear that we needed to expand the knowledge and the networking of the ag robotics community nearby the most mature end users. Here in California was clearly the best playground. So when we met Walt from Western Growers, and Gabe from the UCANR, it was in 2020. So it was virtual, obviously. And the things became clearer. We were going to set up FIRA as close as possible from the specialty crops growers here. Maya, if you want maybe to have some other words.
Yes. Thanks, Gwen. For this edition, it was important to be here in Woodland, closer to the capital, to foster automation growth. As you can see, the Yolo County Fairground is a nice venue for the FIRA events, and I would like to thank our major local partner who will help this edition to grow. S3 Innovate, Greater Sacramento Economic Development Council, City of Woodland, Raley's, and all the partner and exhibitor that you can meet today at this event. California is one of the pioneer and major playground for robotics and automation. And last week, we spent 5 days with international delegation of growers for a study tour, sharing experiences and feedbacks from thousands of Californian growers. It was incredible to see the tech in action, and we can see the importance to how important it is to share and exchange the best practices with different growers coming from all over the world. It is exactly the purpose of what GoFar does for the development of this industry. For this, I would like to thank Hort Innovation and the State of Queensland Department of Agriculture and Fishery and Farm Concept, because we are now starting a 3-year project in Australia, so we are so excited to get it off. Last, this year, you will see new products, you will see new machines, the growing collaboration we have with major OEMs such as New Holland, John Deere, and also great content through the panel discussion and the different pitch sessions. So we hope you enjoy. Have a very nice FIRA USA. Thanks.
And now, let's welcome Glenda Humiston, the Vice President, Agriculture and Natural Resources at the University of California, to tell us more about the premiere movie coming soon. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. Glad to have you here. I can't follow up much better than they did in encouraging you to really enjoy all the various venues, the demonstrations, all the things to see here. But in addition to that, we've got a very, very special couple of events today and tomorrow. Before I talk about the premiere, let me encourage you to think about attending our breakfast tomorrow morning. We're going to be hosting our first ever 4-H breakfast. It's a fundraiser for our 4-H youth development programs to try to get those kids, you know, we have kids as young as 5 all the way through 18, get them interested in robotics and ag tech and STEM-related activities as a career. And we'll have a lot of the kids there. They'll be showing off some of their projects. So please join us if you can, 7:30 tomorrow morning. I forget which building, but yeah, the building over there where they do the food. But anyway, come join us if you can. In addition to that, some of you may not be completely familiar with UC A&R. We're the part of the University of California system that isn't really the campuses that you know so well. You know, we've got these 10 amazing campuses scattered all over the state, but in addition to those, we have offices in literally every county of the state. We serve them all by bringing research and knowledge from the campuses out, but also we place scientists in those communities. They live and work there, working closely with farmers, natural resource managers, local communities, to identify what the needs and issues and challenges are, and then cooperatively work together to conduct research to find solutions. And then our cooperative extension folks go an even step further to make sure that research gets translated into workable, usable content or technologies or best practices as the need may be. So I encourage you to get to know our cooperative extension folks. And frankly, not just here in California, this is a national program. Every state has it. And increasingly, we're working closely with a lot of international partners who are coming here to learn about how our cooperative extension system works and how they might create a cooperative extension system in their country, which I personally think is an amazing idea, because what we've really done is harness the power of higher education and research to actually be applied and useful in the local community and the farm. And furthermore, even more importantly in some ways, we employ about 19,000 volunteers. One of the real highlights of the work we do in many of our statewide programs is create opportunities for both youth and adults to get their hands into science. They work with us on collecting data, on our scientific research, and helping getting the word out on that. Related to those activities, we have 9 research and extension centers scattered around the state where literally hundreds of scientists come every year to do a wide array of research. We also host a lot of the public. We were privileged this past spring to host a team from PBS, our public broadcasting system, who did a lot of filming and interviewing and created an episode for an Emmy award-winning program called Fresh Glass, which I bet a lot of you haven't heard of it, but if you watch our episode, I bet you're going to go watch a bunch of the other episodes, because Cassandra Shagg, who's the producer and the moderator of this, does an amazing job of digging into what her subjects are. And they're all around food and ag, all of her subject matter. So she did a lot of filming last spring at one of our research extension centers down in Southern California. And we're privileged to be able to do a sneak world premiere today here at FIRA. The actual show itself will be on PBS next Thursday for everybody else in the world to see, Halloween night, Thursday night. But today at 1 o'clock, join us over at the plaza, which is near the food area, and come and watch this premiere of the show. I think you're going to really, really enjoy it. And we do have a little sneak premiere that I think we can tee up right now.
On the next episode of Fresh Glass.
This is the best fertilizer you're going to get.
We're diving into the realm of agriculture and its importance within our communities.
At least 1 out of 5 kids here in California is food insecure.
There's more than meets the eye when it comes to food, and this episode sheds light on how vital it is to our health and well-being.
If you can't feed yourself or your community, it's over.
So once again, please join us 1 o'clock over near in the plaza near the food area to see the full episode, and then please go tell your friends to watch it when everybody else does. You're privileged to get a sneak preview when everybody else gets to watch it next Thursday. And thank you again for being here at FIRA and joining us in producing ag robotics improvement for the world.
Thank you very much, Glenda. So now let's welcome on stage the first panel of the day, moderated by Michael Rose, partner at the Mixing Bowl. The topic of the panel will be Advancement in Robotics for Farm and Food Production, a 2024 overview.
Well, that's a good start. We've got water everywhere. I've lost my mic. And we need a clicker somewhere. I guess it could have been worse. Good morning. On behalf of FIRA and our panel, welcome. We are going to talk about the state of automation and robotics in farming and food production across the agri-food value chain. And we're going to talk about it from farming to processing to retail and the consumer perspective. And so we've got a great group today here with Michael, Jason, and Faith. So why don't we kick this off by having each of you guys introduce yourself.
Yeah, Mike Turkovich, farmer here in Winters, which is a small town just west of Woodland.
My name is Jason Sedano. Can you guys hear me? Jason Sedano, I work for Taylor Farms, and I'm in charge of innovation and IP. So my role is basically to try to help identify and then foster any new creative innovations. Pretty much, I love TRLs, so from TRL 1 to 9, and then I hand them off at that point and make introductions to whoever in our business are the actual experts who can then actually deploy and use that piece of technology. And it's, seed to fork anywhere I can find useful innovation. I've found that I've spent a lot of time now in this part of the value chain to try to feed the plant. So I'm excited to kind of learn from everyone here and share whatever little I've learned from you guys mostly. I see a few people who have taught me what I'm going to talk about today.
And good morning. My name is Faith Garrard. I'm the executive director of Fresh at Raley's. We're a grocery store. I'll tell you more about probably later. But what's funny is I get to see videos that come from Taylor Farms of the great innovation they're doing that brings great quality to our stores. But my role is really overseeing all of the fresh categories in our stores. So I have a team of category managers and buyers and quality assurance teams that are responsible for all of the produce, the meat, the seafood, bakery, food services, anything that's fresh that's either made in our stores or comes to us fresh that we sell to our customers. So I'm excited to share with you all kind of the consumer perspective and what it looks like at the end of the value chain for automation and robotics.
Great, thanks. What do I need to do to bring this slide up? Let's go back one. So FIRA asked us to kick this off by debuting our 2024 crop robotics landscape. It's a follow-up to one that we did in 2022. By way of background, at the Mixing Bowl, we focus on the nexus of technology, food, and ag, fostering thought and leadership. And one of the things that we do is research and publish landscapes like we're going to talk about today. And I want to call out my partner, Chris Taylor, who's with us, who is the point person on this project, and we'll be around all day if you want to talk about these landscapes at all. And at Better Food Ventures, we are seed investors in technology and entrepreneurs using technology across the agri-food value chain. So we create these landscapes to help ourselves and hopefully others and producers to get their arms around this marketplace of innovation and other marketplaces of innovation. We segment the market out to better understand it, and then we sub-segment it out kind of based on functionality to understand who the companies are and where they're operating. So it just makes it easier, at least for us, to understand who the players are and what's going on. So I want to take a few minutes today, and I know it's hard to see, and there's a lot going on, and so I want to kind of walk through the landscape and then talk about kind of our perspective on the marketplace since we did our last one in 2022. So just to set a baseline understanding of what, when we do this landscape, for our purposes and a foundation, a crop robot is an autonomous machine that can perceive its environment, it can analyze that data and act on it in real time and engage in a crop-related activity. So it could be anything from a auto steer retrofit down to an indoor greenhouse tomato harvesting robot that's identifying tomatoes on the vine, deciding that it's ripe or not, and then finding it and picking it. So there's a large spectrum of what we consider crop robots. So to give you an idea of what makes it on the landscape and what doesn't make it on the landscape, we cover indoor, we cover as well as open field production. We cover land-based as well as aerial. What we don't cover, because we're focusing on crops, we don't cover fiber crops, we don't cover cannabis, we don't cover nursery or post-harvest, and we don't cover animal farming. So we stick to this definition when we're looking at the companies as far as seeing what's going to make it on our landscape. Also, we don't include pure component technologies. So if you're just a sensor or if you're a data analytics software package, unless those are involved in a solution where there's action involved, they don't make it onto our landscape either. And the companies that are on the landscape need to be selling what they're developing. If they're developing, and there are a lot of folks out there developing things, and they're using it themselves, they don't get included on our landscape either. We're only looking at people that have a demonstrable prototype and are selling it to other folks. And I think the hardest thing when we do these landscapes is the fact that as you walk around the show, you'll see that a lot of providers are doing multiple functions. We have to put them in a single bucket, and so they only appear on this landscape in one place, even though they may be doing multiple things. So, as you can see, as you go up the left-hand side, what we do is we segment this out based on crop production systems. So you'll see orchard, vineyard, specialty field, row crop, and indoor production. And then we go across the top, you have our functional areas. And within each of those areas, as I said, we take a sub-segment and we segment them out. And most of them are self-explanatory. You know, navigation and autonomy would be the retrofit kit I referenced earlier. And then the biggest distinction, I think, from in years past here is when you look at the orchard and vineyard tractor and platform, we covered that off as a focus area from just general tractors, platforms, and carriers, which we had in our 2022 landscape. So the next functional area is crop management. Again, compared to 2022, there's a new segment focused on orchard vineyard application. The other, I think, major change we've made since 2022 is the fact that we split out smart spraying, and weeding and thinning is its own segment, and physical weeding, which for us, we include mechanical, laser, and heat approaches. And then finally, we have the harvest section, which covers orchard, vineyard, specialty field, and indoor harvesting segments. So we hope that folks find these landscapes helpful, and so I want to talk about what's changed since our 2022 landscape and what our sense of the market is today. Market drivers aren't changing, whether it's herbicide-resistant weeds, evolving regulatory environment, significant fluctuations in the weather. Costs are continuing to increase, and labor availability is not going away. All we've heard so far in the last couple of days is labor, labor, labor. Crop robotic companies seem to be responding to these drivers. They continue to push their product development and drive towards commercialization. And so we've seen almost 100 new companies on our landscape since we produced it in 2022. And interestingly enough, they're mostly appearing in all of the segments. So there's not a heavy concentration on our landscape of just one area. So with all of these companies, what about funding? I think everybody knows that ag tech funding in general is off its highs and its peaks from a few years ago. But we think that if a crop robotic company has a robust offering and they have good product market fit, there's funding available. In the 2 years since 2022, we've seen numerous companies get funded. We've seen them run the gamut from seed rounds to A, B, C, and D rounds. So the money's there. Now, flat may be the new up, but it's there, and we're seeing funding and deals closing. Some folks have been doing this for quite a while, but we still think it's early. We feel optimistic about the sector. In some of these segments, we've seen a lot deeper penetration of solutions. Others, not so much, but we're optimistic because we're seeing new units in the field every day. But still, we think it's early. So wrapping this up, I think the one thing that we might all agree on is that agriculture adopts innovations and new practices at its own pace. So if you want to download our landscape, you want to read a deeper analysis, you can go to our website and download it. So thanks. Michael, should we talk about Button and Turkovich?
Sure. So, yeah, we're a 6,000 acre farm, so we have row crops, orchards, and vineyards, so a little bit of everything. And we're always, looking for ways to become more efficient and improve. So, I think the reason I'm here is we tried that agri-planter, tomato transplanter, robotic transplanter. This is our second season, and had pretty good success with it. But that's just one of the things we're always trying to do. So that we do a lot of irrigation automation. We have GPS on all the tractors and all that stuff. So yeah, what else are you?
Can you walk us through with your transplanter, kind of how you're operating it, and for the folks that aren't familiar with it, how it works?
Yeah, so the planter has, I guess what you guys would call the robots, which physically take out the plants, the transplants out of the trays, and then lays them on a belt that then feeds it down into the ground and is planted. So it's modular, and you can make it how big or small of a machine you want. And it essentially has replaced, we had, I think, 24 people out there, and now we're down to 4. And we can go, 3 times as fast. And so obviously there's a lot of cost savings and efficiency improvements there. Yeah. So.
And you've looked at other systems besides this, when you're evaluating them, what's the criteria you kind of work through, and how did you end up deciding to go with this transplanter versus some of the other technologies you've looked at over the past?
Well, first, I want to see it working. It doesn't necessarily have to be in my field, but I want to see it working in the real world. And then also, so like we trialed one for the first year, and let them do a couple hundred acres, and so we were able to see it work and how it would work, and maybe get a feel for what issues we might have, if we decided to buy it, and then again, it just comes down to if we think it's going to work, then it's just a economic decision based on conservative assumptions, whether it's a decent rate of return and worth doing. Yeah. And when I say conservative assumptions, I mean we, if I usually say double the cost and do half of what they promise, and if it still makes sense, then we'll go forward with it.
So we've got a lot of folks demoing here and who have solutions or selling into the marketplace. What is it that, if you could tell them as a producer, that they need to know? You mentioned it's got to work, but what else do they not see that you would recommend to them or advice you'd have to them for them to be successful in selling into the marketplace?
Well, I think that's the main thing is, it's ag is tough because it's so variable, and so it has to be reliable. That's probably the most frustrating thing. Is like I think I was telling you, ag is dust, heat, sun, water, and none of that stuff works well with technology and electronics. So there's all kinds of problems that I can't foresee, and the tech people can't see either. So it's a process to work through it. But again, so it's going to take longer than you think. It's going to be a little more costly than you think. Like reliability, and then also if having somebody to call and talk to if something goes wrong is also a huge component of that.
On the point of reliability, you mentioned to me when we were chatting before about when it's time to plant, it's time to plant. I got to get in that window. And so to be prepared, you had mentioned that you set up this planter, but you also have contingency plans. Can you kind of walk through and describe that?
Yeah, well, I mean, if we're going to, again, it depends on how big of a project we're doing here, but like if we're, like with this planter, that's a really big deal. It's, most of our, or a huge chunk of our revenue and stuff, and so like that's a really big deal, and we can't have, can't be stuck out there with nothing. So obviously the first year we would have all of our old transplanters, lined up and ready to go in case something didn't work, and we did end up using them. Again, it wasn't because of the planter. It was another aspect of this is like that planter required specific trays, and the industry hadn't, since we're early, there's not a lot of extra trays. So if you have to replant something, you can't just go out and order more plants that they aren't there. So, then you can't use that planter anymore. So we would have to bring in the other transplanters to work. Now, obviously that's changed. I mean, this second year, more people have adopted this planter. So there's obviously, and so the greenhouses have responded, and so there's more, flexibility there. But when you're going first, or when you're one of the early ones, you don't have a lot of that flexibility. And so, so obviously the second year, again, we had everything ready, but luckily we didn't need it this year. And as time goes by and we get better, and the industry gets better, I'll be less worried about that as time goes on.
Yeah. You'd mentioned that you had, I think you might have said you did use drones as well. You looked at different technologies. You're using the planter now for the ones you're not using. Why do you keep coming back and trying new stuff again and again?
Well, that's just the contract of market. We're in a capitalistic market. You got to innovate, and you got to constantly be getting better and improving and being more efficient. Otherwise, you're going to get left behind. You won't be around. So, I mean, that's just the nature of the business. So, and again, like people catch up, but if you are early, you can gain an advantage for a period of time while other people are following. But then eventually everybody will get it and even it out, and then you go to the next thing. But yeah. So.
And isn't there a history with your place and the original processed tomato harvester?
Yeah, our farm is Button and Turkovich. So Button was the original owners, and he's passed away a while ago, but he developed the first tomato harvester. So in 1961, I believe. Yeah. So yeah, it's not just me; it's also the previous owners and of the farm are always, and I think farmers in general are always trying to innovate and get better, more efficient, reduce costs. So.
Yeah, when you mentioned that, I was digging up some statistics and looking at and there was a couple articles recently I read, which was really interesting. When you look at the McCormick's harvester took 15 years from his early work that he took over from his dad until he started to commercialize that. And then one of the interesting things is about the harvesters for processed tomatoes. It went from first implementations to 95% penetration in California in 5 years. So we talk about early, but when something clicks, it seems it clicks. The other thing was interesting also about that was the fact that roughly at 95% penetration in California, it was 1,000 machines. That was it. So it's really, there are interesting dynamics in this market. So.
Yeah, and you see that it wasn't that quick, but you see that with like drip irrigation in California. I think it probably took more like 20 years, but now, it's almost a requirement to grow anything around here. When something's good and right and works, it sells itself real quick.
Jason, you all at Taylor, you touch about everything from growing to processing, and you seem to reach pretty far into the retail market as well.
Yeah. So we're kind of seed to fork in parts of our business. The vertical integration has kind of happened naturally. We weren't farmers until recently, about 5 years ago, when we actually ingested mission ranches. Before that, we really were the manufacturing shop, and the way Bruce had built the business was really all about guaranteeing contracts for growers so they could go finance and do their work, and giving them some cover so that they could create the market and have some stability in what they were doing, because there's already enough things coming at them, right, from different vectors. So that allowed them to have an assured business partner to then feed the large manufacturing, and then the cold chain was the next kind of thing we focused on. In the plant, to talk about automation, I guess if you want me to kind of go there right away. In the plant, we have a lot of automation. Now, what's interesting is people always think it's just job elimination. I think one of the questions is, I don't see it that way. What ends up happening is Bruce just builds another segment. So the second he has more people, he just builds another plant. So where he had 3,000 people in a plant and they're down to 1,000, then he builds 2 more plants, right, to try to hit more products to kind of give into our customers. So the history of the company was food service, right? So just straight raw product to the different places. As that became automated, some of those tools within that line could then be applied into the retail business. So it made those products the price point at which we could produce those products, and the quality and the experience for the consumer was suddenly there. So then, we jumped into a retail. And then now we're jumping into what I call food origami, which is kind of deli. And that's where it's a super complex process that wouldn't be possible to hit a price point and a quality and a food safety capability, but for the automation tools that have allowed us to then kind of expand into that. So to talk about what we've seen specifically, I'm happy to give a tour to anybody if they're ever in Salinas, to show the hard work of everyone else in the company. I'm not part of it, but I get to show it off, which is pretty exciting. But we're starting to see a lot of palletizing, big time robots, right? You're starting to see the arm show up in tray filling, right? So we're starting to see these tools kind of show up, and the rest of the line has always kind of been automated. We still have a lot of people in, and then you have the way. Now, what's interesting about the robotics is it's also, to your point, there's a machine, and then there's a machine that builds the machine, right? So the supply chain and the other supporting automation tools that were needed. So everyone talks about, in our retail division, we were really proud to put in little guys that would go and they kind of fill the trays, and the trays come, and there's like an invisible shield that if you reach into, it shuts off, and then the engineer gets really mad at me, and so I'm not allowed there anymore. But it's not just the arm. What we needed the technology for the big weighers, the big circular ones. And the space, we needed the cold space that was actually high enough. We needed the tray fillers. We needed the tray cover, the press. There was a lot of other pieces of automation that had to exist as a requirement before we could deploy the arm in the middle of it. And so we're kind of a critical mass where we're seeing more and more of that. Now, stop me if you want to, I'll just keep. But what it's done, what I've learned is, as we push more automation in the plant, it also puts more of a pressure on the farming, right, and outside the plant, right? So then some of the requirements get pushed, both in food safety and in quality, get pushed out to the farm, right, of what we expect our grower partners to be able to accomplish and what they feed the plants. So very often we have It happens very naturally. Our engineers and our operational experts who sit in the plant very quickly then reach into the farm, right? To try to push, like, again, if we have less eyes on the product in the plant, we need more eyes, be them digital or human, out on the field to try to help us, right? And I'm trying to think, I had another kind of big thing I wanted to talk about. I think what's exciting for us is when we automate in the field, right? And when looking at your chart, harvest is one I'd love to see grow, right? Be as healthy as the other sectors, which is really exciting to have all those options in those other two sectors, on the touching and up front. But I think what's interesting, and I think as a case study that I think is very positive, that does exactly what you talked about, is like spinach, right? Like once we had that bandsaw and the automated harvesting, which is pretty, destructive, pretty simple automation. It's gotten more complicated because now we have optical sorters, again, trying to do food quality and safety. And quality and safety, if your tool helps with those things, those are always a huge in for us. We love to improve the quality and the safety of the food, right? Food safety is always top of mind every single day, right? Today, right? Rushing back to do more of that, like always talking about how do we do that. But what that did is spinach wasn't I actually had the opportunity to go watch one of the farmers do hand harvest for spinach like 2 weeks ago. And it's a huge crew, 30 people. They do about an acre, right, for the good crews. And they bunch them, and they're a really high-quality product, really premier, really wonderful, but not accessible to a lot of people because of the price point and just the fact that there's not much of it exists if you're only doing an acre a day with the 30-person crew. So with the huge bandsaw spinach things allowed, it was almost like, I want to call it like a gateway vegetable, right? It allowed us to create a price point and high-quality product in the tubs for spinach, and allowed access to people to a really high-quality, food is medicine type product at a price point that they could afford, right? And then now I find myself also reaching over to the fancier ones as well, the other ones that are hand bunched and things like that. And so we strive really hard to try to find automation that lets us create more products, not less, right? My sales pitch to her, right, is we want to take over more of the space, right? We want this community to feed us more fresh vegetables of all kinds, so that we can push more complex, more interesting, more nutrient, better for the environment type products, that we can continue to innovate on that front. I'd say the most innovative person in our company is Therese. She makes our salad recipes, because those are the ways we, at the end of the day, reach what you're going to talk about, which I'd love to learn more about. And how do we make those products that can give us more space there? Not like, oh, we're happy with the number of tomatoes we're making. No, we ended up inventing a bunch of other tomato products, and now we can't farm enough tomatoes, right? I want the same thing with the vegetable market. So that's where we strive to, so I'm not sure where I'm going with all this, other than we very much strive to have as much automation as possible. So that's my positive outlook. I do think there's a growth in the segment. I do think we're going to grow the pie, as Bruce liked to say, for many years. I do think there's more products. I'm going to continue to strive to push and take up more shelf space with more cool things that come from what you guys do. And it only happens if we have better quality, better products, new varieties, new things that the farmers can bring to us. And I love everything he said. Validates my conversations with farmers. Is like they're super innovative, they're super hardworking, but you need to be super honest with them. And I think in the field, when the first class of automation came to the field, they were like, "I'm ready. I'm TRL9. Buy my product." And they were not ready, and they didn't know they weren't ready, and they were honestly just didn't know, right? They were just entering the space. What I love to see now is I'll go out and I'll drag a company out to the field. I'm looking at Andy over there, and I'm like, "Are you ready?" And like I was still very green, and the guy's like, "No, you're talking 5-7 years development. You're talking." He started doing right there. He did calculations like, "Okay, 3 cents per pick. I can't get you a solution for that for this much time. It's going to take time to like do it." And it was wonderful to hear the startup actually tell me no, right? Because he had been in the field for 5 years and he knew the difficulty. So I see the ecosystem has grown up, right? They're no longer Silicon Valley engineers. I'm truly seeing farmers who are just super savvy, right? And they're choosing, and a lot of farmers are choosing to go into those companies as well. And I love to see that, right? I now spend more time learning from them than educating them, which is a huge shift for me, which I love to see in those companies. So keep that up, and that's amazing. I'm trying to think where I was going to go with that. I guess you could probably ask me a question at some point. I apologize.
No,
but I'm just very excited. I think what we're doing, what the community is doing, and what they're feeding into the industry is incredible, right? And I think it's really exciting to be on the forefront of all these cool things that we're going to do. Where I get frustrated and where I spend a lot of time is, and that's where I always say, I counsel, as I'm also an attorney, unfortunately, but that was by accident. I was a patent attorney, but an engineer, and then I turned into one. But I would counsel just honesty with the farmers, right? They're sophisticated. They've tried enough things now that you can come in and tell them, hey, I'm only TRL 4, right? I have a long road ahead of me. I'm going to kill half of your crops. I'm really terrible, but I think I'm going to get there, right? He can then, tell me if I'm wrong here, I'm just going to go ahead and assume. He's going to be, okay, I'm not going to give you 100 acres, but I can give you this 10, or I can line you up over here. I have a buddy who has a crop he doesn't care about. But if you weren't honest with him, he's going to give you the 100 because you told him he was ready, and you're going to kill it, and that's it, right? So I think honesty to have that relationship probably goes a long way at this point in the stage. And so that's where I try to do a lot. My assessments are always like, where are you in your process? And then how can I help you get to the point where I can introduce you or have an honest conversation to get you on farm or find you a place, which is another thing I've been trying to find. Because again, Bruce told me, like, go shop for toys and then give them to the experts, right? And I have a couple experts in the room. And I haven't given them very many options, and I feel like I'm not doing my job to give them more. Like, hey, check this out. That's pretty much what I get to do. And so another thing I'm trying to do is also find a place for you guys to incubate more quickly, right? That's not always on farm, right? To step from what is an incredible UC system, an incredible academic machine that we have in this state, to then truly get it through those couple TRLs to what is an incredible ag community of growers, right? So what I've identified is there's a gap, and unfortunately, the people who have to jump that gap is ag tech. And so I think it behooves both the universities and the industry to try to find that middle ground to help you guys not have to jump a chasm to be able to give us cool new toys. And with that, I yield the floor for now. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Faith, you want to tell us about the retail perspective? And I got to say, your perspective on your domains, I think, is probably the most important because people think about the supply, but if the demand's not there, if the dollars aren't flowing that way, it's just not happening.
Sure, yeah, I'll talk about that. So Raley's, we're, for those of you that don't know, we're a third-generation family-owned grocery chain. We started in 1935 in Placerville and kind of expanded in the Sacramento region. We've come a long way since then. So I had mentioned I have a team of buyers and category managers, and we're responsible for all the stores that are in the California and Northern Nevada market. But in the past few years, we've grown quite significantly, really to grow our economies of scale, if you will. And so now we also have expanded into Arizona, and we acquired a chain called Bashas', which is another family-owned grocery. And that's been part of the pillar of who we are, is trying to build community markets. Mike Teal, who's our owner today, he's very passionate about changing the way the world eats, which is one plate at a time. That's our mission, that's our purpose. And what's great about working for a company that is privately owned is that you aren't just, your shareholders have expectations of how they're changing their impact on the environment and on people. And so you had mentioned, food as medicine. That's a really big part of Raley's focus. We've gone ahead of the curve many times in things we've done in our stores, whether it's technology. We had click and collect, which is basically your curbside pickup at grocery, over a decade ago. Now, that wasn't really what customers were looking for 10 plus years ago. When Amazon came in and started doing 2-day deliveries, consumers got more apt of ordering online. Obviously, the pandemic sped up some adoption, and so that's changed a lot. So it's just interesting about early adopters. Sometimes you went out early as going for that food as medicine. We intentionally prioritize bringing in very healthy, better-for-you products, mostly in the grocery, so that's the shelf-stable world, also well over a decade ago, and so we were early movers when it comes to those items, and so Walmart didn't have them yet. Kroger, all the traditional grocery chains, we gained that extra sales, if you will. Obviously, as anything, the market kind of metals out, and now we all carry very healthy foods. But as we think about where we're going in the future, especially in traditional grocery, it's a very gnarly market, if you will. Grocery and retail in general is highly competitive. If you put a Porter's 5 Force on grocery, you would say I should not buy a grocery store because there's not a lot of profitability at the end of the day. From an entrance, we have now new people like Amazons and other companies who are making it harder for us to compete. You think about, even C-stores and different convenience locations, is that they're leaning into a lot of fresh now because they know people are looking for convenience. And so this market is highly competitive. Like Mike mentioned, you can't just settle and innovate and be fine, because if you don't innovate, you're almost irrelevant. And so we look at ways to be different, and fresh is where the future is for grocery. That's the one thing that we're good at. It's the one thing that we have to double down on. Raley's, for those that are from this area, we've always led into our high quality meats. If we backed away from that, we would lose our competitive advantage, and that goes for produce as well. And so when you talk about food safety and you talk about quality, every grocery chain, every retailer is fighting for the dollar and that share of wallet from a customer. But what we try to do is really act as an upmarket retailer. And in order for us specifically to really, succeed in the future, we have to have high quality. And so it starts with what's happening on the field, what's happening on the farm, and then every step of that way, cold chain needs to be highly focused on. We need that type of automation because skill sets in labor force just across all parts of business have changed a little bit too. So I'm excited to share more about the consumer. I will talk about a little bit of what Raley's has done. Now, if you think about it, we have a lot of grocery stores, relatively different, maybe Safeway's a lot bigger, but, in our market, it's 118 locations. In the Arizona market, it's about the same. And so when you think about just quantity of facilities, that's a lot. And so that's where we do benefit from our up chain suppliers, where they've got, a handful of facilities. They can really leverage their efficiencies and throughput. What becomes a limiting factor for a grocery chain is that we would need to implement something in 118 places. And so then when you talk about an ROI, we really like things that immediately generate revenue, like everyone, of course, or that are margin accretive. And so sometimes it's prohibitive for us to invest in technology within each of our stores. But we do invest a lot when it comes to things that are more cloud-based, of course, right? So less about physical robotics. And, I think about how far we've come from how we order products within our stores. That all used to be manual by people, and we've automated a large part of that, like most retailers now, where they're leveraging basically perpetual inventory in the store to determine what to order. And it's all data-based of what's selling through the register and what's coming in, and how those PO lead times to Taylor Farms or other vendors are queued in so that we have just-in-time inventory throughout the chain. And so that's obviously a big part of what retail is focused on, is the automation from just reducing effort, like reducing the workload, because resources are limited, not just in our stores, but in our corporate office as well. We've also tried things like caper carts, which are those smart carts in our stores. One of the challenges outside of the cost and investment, where you need to potentially be willing to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars just to deploy in a way that's a good test, is that the maintenance for equipment. You mentioned having someone to call. That's always a challenge, is that it's not just our maintenance team in our stores that needs to be able to manage those things. Now it's someone with an engineering background, and I see that evolves in general kind of across the value chain. But then it's also about the customer and their comfort with technology. It's, when you talk about where you integrate it in a retail format, you have the front of house, if you will, and the back of house, which is kind of like a food service term. But if you think about it, customer-facing interactions, people look for people. People want to talk to other people. And so if we replace that part with robotics and technology, we might actually isolate the customer and the reason why they come to our grocery store. But then there's other places where we could look at automation, which is where it's not customer facing. A great example, is Walmart has tested and reiterated, in a sense, with their floor cleaning robots. We had kind of mentioned this, that also do inventory management. And they tested it in the Walmart stores. It didn't work. They didn't really say why. My guess, but I can't speak for them, is that they've got a lot of SKUs in each of their stores. And then also there was some customer feedback, like, giving these robots kind of like a why are you here? And since then, they've actually moved these into their Sam's Club format. And when you think about it, Sam's Club, you have a lot more space in aisles. It's a warehouse-style facility. You're palletizing your products. It's not, 400 facings in a 6-foot set. Now you're talking about probably 6 items because you've got them in pallet offerings. So I think that's probably why they transitioned it. But again, when you think about it, it's going back to 118 locations with a lot of SKUs in our stores. Sam's Club being successful is probably because it's less SKUs and it's more efficient. And so part of it is how do we maximize efficiencies, and that's what determines our investments. If it's not an immediate return from a revenue generator, then it's truly, is it going to increase our actual efficiencies in a way that we're not just paying for the cost of it? Sometimes we do this and we end up making nothing out of it and say that was a fun test, like the caper carts, but not enough ROI. We don't have enough people gamifying on the tablets to generate extra income, and so we'll just pause for now and move forward.
One of the things that you see with the promise of automation and robotics is to be able to conceptually use less inputs, less water, less fertilizer, less chemicals. There's a lot of discussion about consumers coming out of COVID, the healthiness of their food and sustainability. So when you pull that thread all the way through, there seems to be a good match as a driver. But do you find that beyond value, consumers are really, where is that in their thought process?
Yeah, so it is interesting when we look at like just data and surveys of consumers' expectations and then their actions. And so a lot of times, we know customers don't want bad things in their food. That doesn't mean they're not buying things that might have, not healthy things in their food. And so what they say they want and what they truly purchase are sometimes somewhat off kilter. But this goes back to Raley's and our mission, and understanding that we have a responsibility to educate and also carry products that are good to consume. We should be the ones who are vetting a lot of that work, because getting the education to a consumer, thankfully we have the internet at our fingertips, and that's changed so much over time, and every generation has the ability to access information quicker and quicker. And so it'll be very interesting, Gen Z and Gen Alpha, like what type of knowledge that they have when they're really having a higher share of wallet. But at the same time, things like pesticides, things that like chemicals, our team prioritizes finding different ways to make sure that that's what we're focused on. And so, you were talking about, the equipment being able to do things that, prevent needing herbicides. And my eyes just perked up, because these are conversations that we have all the time. Again, I talked about in grocery retail, we're looking to expand fresh and expand quality, and we have to think about those things. We have to ensure food safety and that there's no chemicals in our foods and reduce that. I think about the use of antibiotics in the meat production, if you will. There's different, schools of thought, but I will say since 2018, Raley's has only offered chicken with no antibiotics ever in our meat department, and that was an intentional decision that we made. We actually, instead of passing along that cost, from being an early adopter, we kind of compressed our margin to not change access for our customers. And since then, more companies have kind of transitioned this way, and so consumers really do have a lot of power in what ends up being implemented kind of at the backside of a value chain. And so we understand that. We also try to partner with our suppliers of making sure that if we lean into something that we really believe in, that they believe in it too, because we don't want to prohibit their business from being successful either. But yeah, the pesticide thing is very big on my mind. And just all of agriculture, there's so many reasons why we have to mitigate, different pests and just crop being overrun. But customers kind of trust that we're doing all the work. And it is interesting, you think people wash things and clean their food, but more people don't than do. And so it is part of something we have to be cognizant of and provide options just to keep them safe.
I'm going to move off of that, people not cleaning their food. Look at something else. For all three of you, you talk about innovation and being an adopter of early innovation. Can you talk about the sales process being on the buying side and say the role of channel? It's going to be different from each of you. You all have suppliers, advisors, or providers today that you work with that are trusted and or large. Can you talk about the role of if someone's bringing along a new technology or an innovation, are you more likely to seriously consider it if they're bringing it through so that one of these companies is working with a partner and they're bringing it to you versus your door being knocked on by a startup itself, or at least an early stage company?
Yeah, well, it's a little bit of all of that. We have people knocking on our door. We have stuff where we partner with UC Davis, or other companies partner with UC Davis to trial stuff. I go to stuff like this sometimes. Also, like I have a very specific thing that I want or think I need, and so I'm always looking for like something that's close to what I want. A lot of times stuff that if they knock on your door, they're selling you something, and you're like, that's great, but that's not what I want. But it's a combo, or also again other colleagues or friends in the industry, that maybe I trust. They might say, hey, you should really look at this. We're trying this out, and it seems to have a lot of potential. So, yeah, but to the people in the room, however you do it, just get it out in the field and get it working so that people can see it. It's for us, it's the hardest thing because it's usually a time commitment and a money commitment for someone to just bring something to us and go, I have this idea, I want to try it out. And it's like, well, I got a lot of things going on. I can't, focus my time on and money on this, and the upside may not be very good at all. So that's where and we have done that in the past where we've had, I have this prototype and I'd like to, and we're like, oh, that looks like it might work, and we invest some time and money into it, and most of the time they don't really pan out. The ones that have panned out have, like I said, we've at least seen like a working model.
Yep. Jason?
So. Yeah, I think so you kind of hit the nail on the head. I don't think it matters, like brand doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if it comes from like a partnership. It matters more that it's matched, right? And what I mean by just being matched is it actually fits the need, because I think what I've experienced is when I talk to my farmers and my experts, is they know what they're looking at. They know a lot about the tools, about what the material should be made out of what it's going to survive. Everything that they've been living this incredibly harsh environment, so they're very apt to know what, just from like a first look, what could be good for them. The problem is like solutions mismatched, right? Like the carrot guy didn't need it. It was the spinach guy who needed that. But the startup didn't have access, didn't even know the spinach guy existed, so they went and talked to the carrot guy. The carrot guy's like, I don't need that thing, right? It's not my thing. So a lot of it's just pairing exactly right. Like a lot of it's trusted partners. You hear it from your friends who know what your needs are that are similar, right? And one of my favorite, there's a bunch of favorite things I've learned, but one of the ones I use often of analogy is like, there is this network of, the classic thing we learned about how the mushrooms can communicate under the ground between the trees. I think this industry has an incredibly powerful mushroom layer, right? To the point where I've been privy to that layer every once in a while. I get to tap into it very rarely. One time it was like some guy, one of these experts came to me, he's like, hey, there's a machine in Tasmania, you gotta see it, it's harvesting spinach. I'm like, Tasmania? What's a machine doing in Tasmania harvesting spinach, and how do you know about it, and how did this get on the radar? So to his point, if it works, it sells itself, right? Often there's so much effort to take your tool and match it up with the wrong plant or the wrong thing. So I think a lot of it's alignment. So that's part of my role, is to try to understand what you have and then try to just introduce you to the right person who's doing has that sort of problem, right? So I think that's a big part of it. I don't think farmers are like brand specific or anything. They're very, I want it to be a good partnership, a good person. They want to know more about the technology and more about the support, right? When I call, will they be there? When I talk to them, do they have the knowledge that I can trust is what I know, right? and can they, have an honest conversation to kind of develop this tool set. Pretty much what I've learned it from the farmers, right? And so I try to parrot that, and when I go out and try to search for solutions.
Yeah, and to echo and then add, I think I've heard the word trust and trustworthiness a few times that we've talked about already, and I do think that when you have someone that's a thought partner that's been through it, or that shares that this is a solution or an opportunity that makes sense, that you immediately have a quicker buy-in. But then kind of tagging on to what you both mentioned, it is about need state and alignment. And I have this is an interesting example, and it's more from a regulatory perspective, but we talk with different companies all the time about different software solutions or enhancements, and they're all very interesting, and it's all things I would love to do because it would improve my quality, it would improve efficiencies, but I don't really have a use case to implement it right now. And then you have something like FSMA 204, so that's the FDA's food traceability final ruling that will go into effect January 1st, 2026. And that requires us to have a more robust tracking, technology or tracking method for items on a food traceability list, and that's just higher risk items that aren't currently tracked in enough of a matter. And so a lot of these companies where we've talked about inventory management or quality assessment at our warehouse are now also offering a solution as it relates to being compliant for FSMA 204. Mm-hmm. And so then there becomes an opportunity for me to explore their technology in general, because now I need something to solve a problem that, yes, it's regulatory and that's the problem case, but now it opens an opportunity for all of their technology to be viable, because it wasn't enough just to be a quality assessment tool for the cost of it. And so I think really understanding, with your solution, with your technology, what's your problem statement, and making sure that it aligns with the customers that you're sourcing and that you're working with. You mentioned, leveraging the UC system or different education systems. They're that great in between of being able to close those loops sometimes and make sure that you understand the problem statements of an industry. We've integrated different solutions that were made for grocery and then made for others, and there's pros and cons in both of those. Made for grocery is very niche, and there's not enough expansive technology, and then made for others means that we have to customize, or the out-of-box solution isn't very, very useful, or there's things that aren't synergistic. And so I think this is like anything, but if you understand truly what the problem is, then you're going to have a good strategy in trying to source your customer. Mm-hmm. If you don't, then there might be a misalignment of, that's really not my problem, or that is interesting, but here's a bigger problem. I guess it would be ask questions, and if you're seeking more customers, is what are your problems, and building a good relationship of not always just selling the solution, but asking the questions about problems and not having the answer today, but working on it for the future.
Yeah. You had mentioned when we were talking about labor and putting, the face to the customer. Can all three of you talk about, there's people talk about labor availability. You also have people saying, oh, robotics, automation, they're taking our jobs. But I also have heard you all at one point in time talk about repurposing or using the human to do certain things in your environment. So can you talk about that? So is it about labor availability? I just don't have enough people doing it, or I can use the people and free them up to do something else, and what is that?
It's, I can share two stories of that. So we didn't get rid of anybody when we got this transplanter. I have a lot of things that I need to get done, or I could do better. So if I can, as he said, make this more efficient, I can take those people and dump them into, something that's, I can improve more. And so I'm growing my company and the efficiency of my company and producing more with less or more with the same. So yeah, I view it as, it's a pie that can be grown. If the regulatory and business environment is appropriate, you can grow that pie and produce more with less, which is better for everybody. And you can. And another example on a larger scale is that what we talked about with that tomato harvester. All that stuff was the exact same stuff. Oh, you're taking all those jobs. Well, if you look at it on an industry scale, At that time, they were hand-picking 2 million tons of tomatoes. We've grown that to 11 million tons and feed the world. We have created so many more jobs, and they're better jobs, with that invention. So yeah, the jobs might look different, but they're usually better, and there's usually more of them. And to your point about availability, that all ebbs and flows. There's times where there's not a lot of labor. There's times where there's, I have people knocking on my door asking for jobs. But what I have noticed is with the tech is it's requiring more skilled labor, and that has always, I remember my grandpa saying it, my dad saying it, we can never find enough skilled labor. And so that seems to be is going to put even more pressure on that skilled labor market going forward, in my opinion. I've noticed it with us. Like, you replace a bunch of relatively unskilled labor, but like all these, the guys, like when they sell this machine to you, they're like, well, yeah, put your best guys on that. And it's like, yeah, well, everything I need to do, I need my best guys. I only have so many best guys. I'm always looking for more best guys, But I think that's always been a problem. But yeah.
Faith?
Yeah, I would say, again, with resources is that there's more to do than we have people, but we also have extremely high operating costs as a retailer as well. And so, part of it is you have to do less with more. Just in general, that's kind of the way of business, but definitely the way of grocery. And so I look at automation as all just adding value to one, the customer, because you had mentioned the more you can lower the cost of goods, the better prices you can give to your customers. And so while we're chasing quality and we're chasing a value proposition, customers are our main focus. And part of that is how do we get them the best product for the best cost that we can do. And labor is expensive, and labor is expensive in California. It's expensive everywhere, and so we operate, as I mentioned, over 300 stores, on the western states, and that's well over 30,000 people. And so when you think about that, that's a lot of people for labor. And so when we add technology, it's more about how can we take away some of the redundancy in tasks and use that knowledge and that time of that person to do other things that we can't automate yet. And I think that's what we'll continue to do is what can we automate and then reallocate, their focus, because at the end of the day, we want every person in a store focused on the customer, and anything that they're doing that's not focused on the customer is taking away from the customer experience. And I would say that the stores are our customers at the corporate office, and so it's the same thing. If there's times where we're spent, way too in the weeds of something, if we can automate those processes, whether it's at our warehouse or anywhere else, that provides better customer service down the value chain.
You got a thought on that?
I do. She nailed it, though, but I'll try to say it in my own words. But yeah, the answer is yes, right? Yes, we have lacking labor, but yes, we're going to repurpose them. It's a little bit of everything. I think I saw Richard Chapman here. He's a Hartnell professor. I think so. Part of it is also how we retool, and the workforce is coming online. On the aggregate, the workforce that's coming online is going to be very digitally focused. It's just how the educational system is developing the new young minds. There is a touch and an expectation to use technology when they join the workforce. So one, there's the big aggregate pictures we all know about, right? Population growth planetarily, and then within the United States, we're going to buoy that up with immigration and everything. Whatever, we have those numbers. They're all still going to track to make a tighter force of people that we all go after. So then you segment them down to where people are going to want to go work, right? And a lot of those people, there's better jobs to be had, so then it puts more pressure on us, right? I think we just, as an industry, my goal is really to create better jobs for everyone that's there and keep them in the segment. I don't want anyone to leave. What scares me is like when the extreme high-tech startups, when they disappear, I don't want those guys to go then join a different industry, go into different robotics. I want them to stay within the realm, all the way down to everyone we have in our value chain and who works for us. So part of it is, and it's exactly what I love, what was it, 2 million pounds, now 11 million?
Tons.
Yeah, tons. Jesus, that's a lot. So, but that's exactly what we want across all of our different, raw products, all of our different commodities. It's and I think our spinach and we have an automated harvester here from our. One of the biggest things is when we get those machines, we still have, it goes from 20 people down to 10, but now those 10 people do 50 acres, right? And so then what do? We have a new product, more fresh. So it really is what I started with saying is like, when it comes to labor and it comes to these automation solutions, and the other thing it does, and this is one of the nice benefits, is what I've noticed like living in Salinas, right, is they are some of the best tradespeople in the world, right? I was in Texas, DC, Silicon Valley. The best plumbers, the best electricians, I mean, they are top notch in Salinas. They're incredible. And it's because as Taylor Farms and these other big companies have done all this mechanization and automation in the plants, it's created an ecosystem of all these other jobs that, like, all the electricians and all the plumbers and the HVACs, there's this incredible class of really good jobs, right, that have now exist to support us in that value chain as that supply structure. And those are the types of innovations, like both within the company, because we're going to need more engineers and more people to do that digital touch, but then also the entire supporting class and all the other vendors and everything else that kind of stacks underneath us as we build that company, right? We push up and we require 2 or 3 more floors of innovation to exist, right? Exactly like we need guys to build those trays, right? We need somebody else to maybe buy a mold, and the guy can make a whole company out of that, as opposed to being bending over all day. He can instead just start a business selling you trays, right? If he bought a little, there's all these opportunities in these automations, and it's because it just drives a lot more product.
That's great.
Yeah.
We're going to open it up for questions, but you kind of touched on this, but one little thing I just want to point out that's changed in the 2 years since we did our last landscape, talking about labor, and you alluded to it, is and people have only seemingly started to talk about in the last 2 years, is the birth rates and fertility rates. And if you look at the top 10 agriculture producing countries in the world, their birth rates and the fertility rates, and most of them have dropped and are dropping at a rate where they will not even have replacement. So when you look at the role of robotics and automation and all along this value chain, if that continues, it seems to make sense. So what can we do for questions? Who has a question? Come on.
Sweet.
I'm going to come out there with a microphone.
I got one.
There you go.
Brent Hills, UCA and R. Given the cultural aspects of adoption of robotic technologies, what are some of the barriers you're facing internally to your internal culture in adopting those?
Anybody want to?
Do you have Luddites inside your company?
A lot of what?
Luddites?
Yeah. No. Internal, just time. I mean, it's time to assess, right? Taking the time to actually find time, and because food production is breakneck, especially for us. We have like 40 days for spinach, 60 some for the next crop. These crops are turning so fast, and they haven't queued up. It's for it's being very respectful of how much time I take from my class. I think that's a big issue. Is they're more than willing to do it, and they get really excited when we have the first conversation and the first 30-minute sit down. And then when I go back to them, they're just so busy, right? Like everyone's in the desert right now, right? Because they're just so busy down there doing, knocking things out. So I think time is a big one internally. I think the desire to ingest these things is there. They want to take them in, they want to, but it is a big factor for me is time. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'll just add, context and communication are critical. If you don't give the why and the context in the right audience for them to understand what's coming, then people don't really like change. I mean, I think everyone in this audience probably does like change, but there's parts of your life you may not, and so getting people to adopt change is always a key focus. I mean, we have like a change management strategy when we try to do any big technology push. But then the communication point, it's not just at the beginning. You mentioned like time is critical. It's communication after you've implemented, communication as 2 ways so that you can get feedback as we're implementing, because inevitably technology does not work perfectly when we start something. And so it's making sure that those who are impacted feel like they can communicate their frustrations, but also communicate their ideas. And so if you don't have a leader or a chain of lead that creates that type of culture, then typically it is harder to be successful.
That's a really good point. And I think with communication is you can you can reduce the time it takes them to assess. Because I think what happens is I go to them like, hey, this is really cool. And in their mind, they're like, okay, is that gonna, if I take that into my plant, how's that gonna affect my food safety? Right? Is my smartwatch guy gonna kill me? Right? How's that gonna affect the quality? How's that gonna affect, like, and so they have, and so if you can through communication, have the answers to those and answer them up front, then they're free to be like, okay, now it's just an implementation. Or so I think communication's huge. Yeah, that could solve a lot of these. That's really good.
Can I just, and you can answer this first, follow on that. Can you tell us within your company's organizational structure, who is it and their titles that evaluate the technologies when they're coming into the company? And does it depend on what type of technology, or is it centralized, and who's making those calls?
I'll start. So big stuff, it's obviously the leadership side of it. When you're talking about how grocery works, you have the sales side, which is kind of me, right? Merchandising. You have operations, which is who runs our stores. You have the IT team who's going to implement something. That three-legged stool is very critical in those decision making. But then you have the subject matter experts, or the areas of the business that we're trying to impact. And if it's for the whole company, it's a little bit different. It's more shareholders. But when you talk about innovation, at our warehouse in Natomas, which is right outside Sacramento, we've got to have the subject matter and the experts in the room kind of as a council to give input on what their challenges are. Because if we don't know the true problems and we're trying to implement technology, then we're just doing it because we think it's a good idea. And technology is one of our most challenging things to implement because of resources, so we have to really prioritize them. And so I would say, it starts with leadership, but without, really collaborating with, my team, if it's involving some part of Fresh, then we might have a solution that gets really far down the line that's not going to be successful because it is the stakeholders that know it. And then from executing it, it can't be that team, the leadership team that's saying this is what we're doing. It truly has to come through each different leadership point of why we're doing it, and it can't just stop at a director. It has to go to the manager, it has to go to the production lead, or whoever it is. It has to get to the leader of the least, if you will, so that there's fully understanding of what's happening.
Michael, why do I assume you wear lots of hats?
Yeah, so I'm a little different there, and it ties into the culture question too. So we're a pretty flat organization, and we only have 50 employees, so it's basically me and my dad are making the decisions, but then we're also in charge of implementing those. And so as far as our employees go, the culture is, why are we doing this? You're making my life more difficult. And honestly, if I'm being honest, I struggle with that a lot too, because a lot of the times I'm the one trying to implement and troubleshoot these problems. So that's something I go back and forth on a lot, is trying to find that balance of, what's going to work and is it worth it? And then, the Sunday mornings when I'm out there, or Saturday nights when I'm out there trying to get stuff fixed and everybody's waiting on me, and no one's answering my phone, or like, yeah, we'll be here in 2 weeks to fix it. And it's like, oh, that doesn't happen. So that's a big issue, and it's a lot like what they're saying, communication. Like, I need to, and again, I'm trying to do this in Spanish, but I'm communicating to our guys like, if we can get it to work, it'll be great. You just gotta bear with me a little bit here, and I also have to tell myself that too.
Yeah.
All right, Jason, you get the last word.
Okay. So Taylor Farm specific, it's wonderfully decentralized and autonomous, right? Which means that every segment, every location controls its own P&L and its own destiny, and that's by design. Bruce loves the internal competition between the different regions, the different sections, the different parts of the company, which means there's a lot of doors open. Like, as an IP guy, as an IP attorney, it's infinitely frustrating because all the windows and doors are open on the company, right? So that means everyone can jump in and out of this, but it's also a huge opportunity. So, and Bruce's thing is like, it's either, do the right thing, the customer matters. These are like the core foundation of what we do, and he's empowered his people. Anyone you meet at Taylor today who's here, they are the decision maker. They are the guys who can decide. So like my role, I'm one of the few, I sit in the parent company at the very tip top. It's just lawyers and accountants, right, and me, right? And all the different operating companies, I pretty much have to be your partner, right? So when I see something that I think is interesting, and then I go on a sales pitch with you to try to convince our decision makers, right? I'll point some out. But have the conversation with them to see if it fits them, right? Their specific needs, right? Our Florida grow operation has a very different need than our California or our Yuma. And then in the plants, each plant is very different. Our deli, it's all about changeovers, and they run 300 SKUs and stop and do another thing and another thing. And then food service is running all the time, right? I can't possibly be an expert in those. So I think the good news is, and the bad news is for Taylor, it's really the experts are each one of those. Each place has its own expert. They're highly sophisticated and highly intelligent about what they're doing at each one of those locations. Mostly designed so that they can very, 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 very precisely respond to the local customer, right? Raley's out here, Wawa on the east. Like, they need different things, we respond to them. Whatever's their needs. So my role really is to be your partner, understand what you have, and then try to find the right person to introduce you to that could make that decision at Taylor.
That's great. So, thank you all, and thank you all today. And can we get a big round of applause for our panel today?